so strange and so huge that they can truly be called monstrous. Rare encounters with them give us a tantalizing glimpse of a mysterious world. Now an expedition is on the way to explore this little-known wilderness, the Antarctic Ocean. Scientists will use deep-sea submersibles to venture into its icy waters.
No, a really huge one. Yeah, incredible. Wow.
This is a journey into the icy deep and a world of giants. The remotest place on Earth. The Antarctic continent is so inaccessible and hostile that it was only a century ago that people started to explore it. And the oceans around it are still largely unknown today. So strange and so these waters are dauntingly vast, icy and deep, that they have remained largely unexplored. The Antarctic Ocean is on average 4,000 to 5,000 meters deep. And even near the continent's coastline, the seafloor drops off sharply to a depth of 500 meters. With sea temperatures near freezing all year round, exploring these deep waters has, until recently, been a huge challenge. Now, however, a team of scientists is planning to spend a month in the largely unknown waters, searching for the A team of scientists is planning to spend a month in the largely unknown waters, searching for the giants that are said to live here. Is a scientific research vessel fitted with the latest deep-sea technology. The Nadia and the Deep Rover each can hold 2 to 3 passengers and dive to a depth of 1,000 meters. A highly sensitive camera is also installed to record any animals the team may discover. The first dive will take down Dr. Claude de Breuer, an expert on the Antarctic Ocean. He studied its marine life for over 50 years and has discovered that some animals grow to an enormous size here. It's called polar gigantism.
During this expedition, we try to find, to show at least some good example of gigantism among different groups.
Finally, all is in place for the first descent.
Okay, gentlemen.
It's an exciting moment. They will dive into the depths of the Antarctic Ocean for scientific research. But the mission is not without its dangers, and they approach the iceberg slowly and cautiously.
Yeah, I've got visual on it here.
Once you have the handy for each other visual, you are clear to vent.
The venting now, over.
Roger, have a good dive.
The two submersibles will stay close together in case they encounter any problems. More than 90% of an iceberg floats below the surface, so they could hit a wall at any time. They've come as close as they dare. Below water, the iceberg has an extraordinary sculpted surface, like a honeycomb sponge.
I believe this is quite spectacular.
The team within the submersible are warm enough, but the surrounding water is particularly cold. Pure water freezes at 0 degrees centigrade, but seawater, being salty, doesn't do so until nearly 2 degrees lower. In the dark depths, they can just make out the base of the iceberg. They're only 50 meters below the surface, but there is no sign of life here. The submersible descends further.
Control, Nadir. On bottom, standby, bottom report. Temperature is minus 1.2.
They've reached the sea floor and a depth of 500 meters. The Antarctic Ocean is cooled by floating ice, so the water near the surface is actually colder than that at the bottom. To their surprise, the seafloor is covered in living organisms. The team hadn't expected to find such a rich and colourful variety of creatures at these depths. What looks like an underwater garden is in fact a community not of plants, but animals. As the submersible drifts across the bottom, it appears to disturb some of the residents. They're feather stars, ancient marine invertebrates that can use their long arms to propel themselves through the water. Feather stars spend most of their time on the sea floor, but will swim to avoid predators. Many of the seafloor residents are filter feeders that sift out plankton from the water. These pink, alien-looking creatures are called sea pigs. They are bottom feeders and live in the deepest parts of the ocean. scales on their feet pick up sediment from the seafloor and transport it to their mouths. They move at a slow and leisurely pace, so not to waste energy.
This is a nice fish.
Wow, is that a nice fish?
Nice fish, this.
The strange pale fish is an ambush predator that lies in wait, resting on the seafloor on stilt-like fins. Ice fish are unique to this environment, and unusually their blood is colourless and transparent. What could be the reason for this? All other animals with a backbone have red blood cells which help to transport oxygen around the body. So how do ice fish manage without it? It seems they compensate by having a larger heart and wider blood vessels so that their blood circulates more quickly. And since cold water has a higher oxygen content, ice fish appear to manage perfectly well. But the team are hoping to catch a glimpse of an Antarctic giant, and they soon strike lucky.
Oh, and a big starfish over there. Look at the size of that thing.
What is that? It's very funny.
The starfish seems to be enormous. Judging from the size of the ice fish next to it, the octopus starfish could be over a foot across, bigger than a large pizza. Another octopus starfish is wrapped around a marine sponge. Most sponges are no larger than a human fist, but this one is huge.
This is an example of sponge which can grow to 50 and in some places to 1 meter high.
As they move on into the dark, a massive rock face suddenly rises up before them. And they're faced with an extraordinary spectacle. The rock is entirely covered in sponges.
A really huge one. Yeah.
Claude has never before seen such a variety and density of sponges in Antarctic waters, and many of them are indeed giants, nearly a meter long. Sponges may look like plants, but they are in fact very simple animals that attach themselves to rocks and feed on drifting plankton. It's a sight you might expect to see on a coral reef, but not in polar seas, where most creatures grow very slowly.
Thank you. Absolutely great. On the walls, there is no square centimeters without an animal. It's absolutely full. All the 3, 4 meters. So, yeah, sorry, I'm a little bit.
The other sub has brought up some truly intriguing creatures. This is a giant shrimp or amphipod with powerful front legs.
This is a nice example of polar gigantism, in fact, because most of the amphipods in other seas reach the maximum such size, 10 millimeters or so, and here they can reach such big size as you can see.
Another jar holds a huge sea spider, bigger than a man's hand.
When you go out looking at rocks that are millions of years old, you so much more to these amazing creatures than just their skeletons, which leaves the movies with a lot of artistic license. The colors are made up. A lot of the behavior is made up. Skeletons, which leaves the movies with a lot of artistic license. The colors are made up. A lot of the behavior is made up.
But now, remarkable new fossil finds are opening a window on the prehistoric world as never before.
Technology is allowing us to answer questions that were previously unanswerable. We get to make dinosaurs move again for the first time in millions of years. And we can figure out their colors and even how they lived.
Can recent discoveries force us to put aside the movie magic and finally see dinosaurs as they truly were when they ruled the Americas?
I think that we're closer to uncovering the truth of the ancient dinosaurs than we've ever been.
Fact is stranger than fiction.
My first exposure to dinosaurs was probably the Flintstones, which is not a very accurate portrayal of dinosaurs. You know, like all kids, I was sort of immersed in this dinosaur culture. I've always been fascinated by the biggest, the smallest, the highest flying, the lowest diving. That's where you really start to learn the limits of evolution. I wanted to find creatures that were among the largest ever walking the face of the earth. Usually the largest dinosaurs are also among the worst preserved because it's so hard for a creature of that size, the size of a house, to become a fossil. There's a group of plant-eating dinosaurs called titanosaurs that we know relatively little about, so I was very attracted to finding one of those. How do you find a dinosaur? It's the number one question I get asked. The world is geologically mapped, and so to find dinosaurs, you have to find rocks from the Triassic, the famous Jurassic, or Cretaceous period. So I'm looking for the green colors that are Cretaceous age deposits, rocks that are at least 66 million years old. There are some rocks here, but this is Congo Basin, which many plants here. Northern Patagonia, rocks of the right age. But quite a bit of work has been done here. But here, down in southern Patagonia, we have everything that I was looking for. Patagonia is an amazing place. Vast, sweeping landscapes. Sometimes it's called Fin del Mundo, the end of the world. It's the last stop before Antarctica. To get to this site from the U.S. is a 6-airport trip. And then once you're there, you have to get jeeps, and you have to navigate up very rough dirt roads. No other paleontologists have been working within maybe 1,000 kilometers. This is the field area, and you get yourself on the ground and you walk, and you just look for bones sticking out of the rocks. That year, in 2004, we were about a month into the expedition, and we hadn't found anything that I would say was really great. So at this point, the pressure's on. You start to worry. We had a week left. And then, finally, we found something. A piece of bone exposed that had weathered out of a cliff face, so it was super easy to excavate. So it doesn't take us long before we uncovered a very, very large femur. 2.2 meters long, that's about 7 feet, 1 inch long. We know that we're looking at one of the largest dinosaur bones that had ever been seen. This was an incredible result. But where are the rest of the bones? We dug and dug and dug around there, but there wasn't another bone to be found. But still, that told us giant dinosaurs lived here. And that was enough for us to know that we had to come back to this place. A year later, I was ready for a return expedition, but I needed a bigger team. And I called up my friend Matt Lamont.
This was somewhat of a professional gamble, I would say, for Ken. Ken, in a lot of ways, was putting all of his eggs in one basket. I think that there was some pressure upon arrival that second year in 2005. You know, we're not there for, for a month-long vacation in the desert. We're there to find dinosaurs.
On the first morning, I was prospecting for bones and saw a dinner plate-sized piece of bone exposed in the desert. I GPS the location, I give it a field number, and I move on and I start to prospect for some other sites.
This is 2005, so I put on my iPod and put on some heavy metal. And I walked basically up the side of a mountain, thinking that I was going to find the next big thing. But I turned around when I got to the top of the mountain, and I saw my 3 Argentine colleagues, Marcelo Luna, Lucio Ibericu, and Gabriel Casal, all kind of gathered around this spot that didn't really look like it was much of anything. And so I go down there, because they're lingering there. Maybe they found something interesting.
I returned to the spot where I had found the bone, and I saw something astonishing. They have about a half of a leg bone exposed, half a femur.
The bone is 6'3" long, so we knew we had a giant titanosaur.
And soon, other bones start appearing. When we began to excavate the tail, it was really a thing of beauty. It was articulated, meaning that the bones were still touching each other like they were in life. We started to see that this was giving us our best window yet into the anatomy of the largest creatures to walk the planet. To protect the bone in transport, we wrap it with bandages of burlap and plaster. This is what we call jacketing the bones. We had excavated about 200 square meters of rock as hard as concrete. After 4 more really grueling field seasons, so that's 5 years, we end up with 70% of the skeleton from the neck down, which was almost 3 times more complete than the next best preserved supergiant. We had this huge creature, maybe the most massive dinosaur ever discovered.
Where does this thing rank compared to other giant titanosaurs? There's an equation you can use based off of modern animals that allows you one way to calculate an estimate of the weight of an extinct animal using the circumference, so the upper arm bone, the humerus, and the femur, the thigh bone.
But for most of these dinosaurs, they don't have the fossil remains, so the weight is more of a guess. But we have the 2 bones that we need. Now we have the key to understanding the mass of this great creature. We start to do the math. We know this individual is one of the largest ever discovered. Is it the largest?
When we finally did crunch the numbers, the number that came out was something like 59 metric tons, 65 short tons that we use here in the U.S., which was mind-boggling to me.
An animal that's 65 tons is the mass of 13 African elephants, the most massive land animal for which we can calculate a weight. This was a very exciting and very tantalizing result. Our next question was, is this a new species of titanosaur? And the only way to find out was to study it in minute detail.
I love dinosaurs so much. By the time I was 13, I was volunteering at our local dinosaur museum. That's when I started hearing whispers of this giant dinosaur that was coming from the edge of the world. You know, it's the biggest dinosaur. Really? Okay. I'll believe it when I see it. And we went into the basement when we opened the door and saw 300 containers, all with bones. It was way more than I ever could have expected. I was a fossil preparator, and my job was to extract the bones out of the rock so we could examine them in close detail.
We didn't know whether it's a new species, so we had to look for novel features in its skeleton.
You're making maybe a dime size of progress a day, but little by little, day after day, it's all just coming together. It's really slow, but
To establish a new species of dinosaur, you have to see at least one feature in its bones that hasn't been seen in any other dinosaur. Eventually, after 3 years, we have the full skeleton just laid out on every tabletop. The 30-foot tail was laid out along one wall and down part of the next. The humerus standing by the door. Now we can see this 77-million-year-old skeleton in all its glory. And finally, work out what it was. We began to get a full set of measurements. This animal would have been 85 feet long. That's almost the size of a basketball court. At the shoulder, it would stand 2 stories high. This was an immense animal. Now, based on all our lab work, we could see that it had unique features that hadn't been seen in any other dinosaur. So this was a new species of Titanosaur. Now we need a name. What would this animal have to fear in its landscape? Essentially, nothing. And we come up with the name Dreadnoughtus, which means fears nothing.
the first chance we got, we ran outside, screamed it as loud as we could. Dreadnoughtus! It was like the best feeling. It's such a cool name.
Now we can identify this dinosaur as a new species, but we still had so many questions about how an animal so large could live.
The largest animals today are the whales. They don't have to contend with walking on land. And it really sparked in me this question of how is this animal moving? All the parts that would tell us everything that we need to know, like muscle, cartilage, tendons, don't preserve.
You can't just open a book and look up the muscles for a new dinosaur. We have to discern those from the bones themselves.
The big limb bones are 6'2", about 800 pounds. We can't move that and try and figure out how it moves. So our solution was to go digital.
We used a 3D scanner to capture all the bones. This was one of the first dinosaurs to be captured in a 3D scan. And this opened up avenues of investigation that would have been impossible by using the real bones.
So this area right here, that is a palm-sized muscle scar, which means the muscle is pulling on this part of the bone so much that it left an imprint.
Now, with these scans, we could begin to reconstruct Dreadnoughtus. It enabled us to have these 3D bones that we can easily manipulate in a virtual environment and do our biomechanical experiments with. One of my colleagues, Kristen Vogeley, has mapped out those muscle scars, attached virtual muscles to test how these dinosaurs move. Let's contract this muscle, let's contract this muscle, and we'll see what the limb does. And so we're actually letting the anatomy inform us about its life. Our analysis of its largely complete skeleton helped us put flesh on the bones of this amazing creature. First, we could see that the bones themselves were big and strong and could easily walk on land. There's really nothing like these creatures on the planet today. But there was one strange anomaly in the tail that puzzled us. Underneath each of the tail vertebrae was a pair of bones that were hanging down, and instead of tapering to a point like they do at other dinosaurs, they flare out into this big paddle for muscle attachment. It was housing these hugely powerful muscles that would go from its leg to its tail.
When we looked at it carefully, we realized that these muscles would have provided powerful leverage in the tail. We thought, oh, if one is fast enough, it's gonna hurt. It's not only that it was so big that nothing wanted to eat it, it was that it was weaponized in the case that something did try.
This was something we hadn't seen before in titanosaurs. This was a tail that could kill or maim the largest predators. I think in comparison to other titanosaurs, Dreadnoughtus looks like about the toughest that I've ever seen.
I think that plant-eating dinosaurs probably are often made out to be these, like sort of gentle giants. But we're starting to understand that just eating plants does not, by nature, make you docile.
I think it's time to recast these giant animals as the sturdy beasts that they were. Look out, meat-eating dinosaurs, because you do not want to mess with a Dreadnoughtus.
We put virtual flesh on Dreadnoughtus to visualize dinosaurs more clearly. Up in Canada, another discovery has gotten even closer to seeing dinosaurs as they really were.
For me, fossils tell us that there's more to the world than what we see today. There's this huge buried past. Normally when we go looking for them, we're only looking at the surface. But sometimes we get a helping hand from miners who are used to digging down far deeper than we would ever dream of doing. So it's no surprise that every once in a while we're going to bump into something. One day out of the blue, I received a set of photos from Suncor, a mining company working in northern Alberta. They found something they suspected might be a fossil, and they wanted to know if we could identify it for them. And that was our start of dealing with this mystery animal from the far north. 2 days later, myself and a technician were on a plane. Fort McMurray exists in the middle of nowhere in northern Alberta, where they are digging out bitumen-soaked sand. We were driven out to the site. Initially, all we saw was a few broken fragments. We were told where it happened and when it happened.
I was digging right in this area right here with my shovel. I could see some really big slabs with that being around with that really distinctive pattern. I've never seen anything come down the bank that had this distinctive uniform pattern to it before.
We found the initial discovery. It was hit by the excavator bucket and it shattered into pieces. And the technician, Darren Tanky, said, what if it's a dinosaur? And then all the pieces started to make sense. And we knew this was going to be a big deal. So if it was a dinosaur, what kind was it? Most of it was still stuck up in the cliff face, completely encased in hard rock. But when we looked carefully at the clues, we could begin to imagine what sort of animal it could be. All we could see was this cross-section in the cliff. Then I began to see shape where the body was. Then we knew this was not your typical dinosaur fossil. We could see bony plates exposed, so we knew we were dealing with an armored dinosaur. We noticed the arc of the armor was curving upwards, so it meant this dinosaur was lying on its back. It was all rather puzzling. The rocks that we were finding this fossil material in are early Cretaceous, about 110, 112 million years old. And at this time, this place was a shallow inland sea. It would be underwater. This thing's on its back.